Every night you do something extraordinary. You leave the waking world, you enter sleep, and somewhere between those two moments, you disappear. Not forever, just long enough that you can never remember it happening. Think about last night. You probably remember closing your eyes. Maybe you even remember thinking, I should really sleep. But then, nothing. The next thing you know, it's morning, or a dream is already unfolding. It's as if someone quietly cut a few minutes out of your life. That's strange, because this happens every single night. You spend nearly a third of your life sleeping, yet you've never actually witnessed yourself falling asleep. Have you ever tried? Maybe you've told yourself, tonight I'll stay awake just long enough to catch the exact moment. For a while it feels possible. You're still thinking, still aware that you're lying in bed. Then, morning, you failed again. Not because you got distracted, not because you weren't paying attention, but because your brain does something so clever that it erases the evidence before you even realize it's happening. And once you understand why, you'll never think about sleep the same way again. The strange thing is, falling asleep isn't actually a moment. We talk about it like someone flips a switch. Awake, asleep, two separate worlds. But your brain doesn't work that way. Imagine walking into a house where every light is on. Now imagine turning them off, not all at once, but one room at a time. The kitchen goes dark, then the hallway, then the bedroom. Some lights stay on a little longer than others. From outside, the house slowly fades into darkness. That's much closer to what happens inside your head. Sleep doesn't arrive all at once. It quietly spreads. Different parts of your brain begin changing at different times. Your attention drifts. Your sense of time loosens. Thoughts become stranger. The rules that normally keep your mind organized start relaxing. They call it hypnagogia. Most of us simply know it as that moment when our thoughts stop making sense. A random memory suddenly appears. Someone you haven't seen in years starts talking to you. You're walking through your childhood home, and somehow it's also your office. You hear your name. You imagine falling. A sentence begins, but never finishes. If someone asked you to explain what you were thinking during those moments, you probably couldn't, because your thoughts aren't following logic anymore. They're becoming dreams before you're fully asleep. It's less like someone switching off your mind and more like watching the lights go out, one room at a time. But here's what nobody tells you about memory. While all of this is happening, another system is quietly shutting down, the one responsible for creating memories. We usually imagine memory works like a camera. You experience something, the brain records it, you can replay it later. But that's not how it works. Your brain is constantly deciding what deserves to become a memory and what should simply disappear forever. As you drift towards sleep, that recording system begins losing its grip. The experience continues. The recording doesn't. Imagine filming a journey, and someone quietly presses stop on the camera before you've reached your destination. You still finish the journey. You just have no footage of the final steps. That's why the exact moment you fall asleep feels impossible to remember. Not because nothing happened, because the part of your brain responsible for saving the experience was already closing down. Your consciousness doesn't disappear instantly. Your recording system does. And suddenly, a lot of strange experiences start making sense. Have you ever noticed that dreams never seem to begin at the beginning? You're never watching the first frame. You're already in the middle of a conversation, already running from something, already standing in a place that somehow feels familiar. Dreams don't feel like they slowly start. They feel like you've arrived halfway through a story. Because by the time your brain starts recording again, the story is already underway, or maybe you've had an alarm clock become part of your dream. The ringing becomes a school bell, a phone, a fire alarm, someone calling your name. Your sleeping brain doesn't immediately realize you're waking up. It simply weaves the sound into the world it has already created. Only later do you open your eyes and realize the dream was quietly borrowing from reality all along. Have you ever spoken to someone while you're falling asleep, only to have absolutely no memory of the conversation the next morning? Parents see this with children all the time. Partners see it too. Someone mumbles an answer, even opens their eyes, Maybe they even sit up for a moment, but by morning, it's gone. Not because they were pretending, not because they weren't conscious enough to respond, because the experience happened without ever being properly stored. Even the feeling of, "I don't think I slept at all," often comes from the same illusion. If your brain failed to build a memory of falling asleep and failed to build memories throughout much of the night, morning arrives feeling like no time has passed. It feels as though you've been awake the entire time. Your memory quietly fills the gap with the only story it can. "I guess I never slept." The transition is missing, so your brain assumes it never happened. And maybe that's the strangest part of all. We spend our lives believing that memory and experience are the same thing, but they aren't. Memory is evidence. Experience is reality. Those are very different things, which means you've lived far more of your life than you'll ever remember. Every day, countless moments vanish before they ever become part of your story. Not because they weren't real, but because your brain decided they weren't meant to be kept. Sleep simply reveals this more clearly than anything else. It reminds us that consciousness isn't a light switch. Memory isn't a perfect recording, and the story you call your life is only the tiny fraction your brain managed to save. Every night, you disappear. Not because your consciousness suddenly switches off, but because the part of you responsible for remembering. Let's go first. Your consciousness crosses a border that your memory can never cross with it. So tomorrow night, when you close your eye, you'll make the same journey again. And tomorrow morning, when you try to remember the exact moment you fell asleep, you'll fail. Not because it never happened, but because the only witness forgot to press record.